Hey, welcome to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Derling. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm excited to do this episode. This is a band that I've been getting into for the last kind of couple years, even though I've been aware of them for many, many years before that and even had some of their music. Now, as a kid growing up in the 80s, watching Much Music, Kim Mitchell was a name that I knew very, very well. And, you know, Much Music played Go for Soda, Patio Lanterns, Logger Nail, Rock and Roll Duty, all of those videos, you know, several times. So I knew Kim Mitchell's music quite well, and I've done an episode where I go through some of his music, actually a couple times, in a CD episode and a vinyl episode. But before he went solo, Kim Mitchell was a member of a band called Max Webster. There's nobody named Max Webster. It refers to four guys and a lyricist. And if you've even a casual Rush fan, you've probably heard the name Max Webster before. So they're a band that existed in a very short time period. They released their first album in 1976 and their last album in 1980. They put out 5 studio albums altogether. And aside from some compilations and a live album, that's it. You know, they had a very short lifespan. Very, very quirky. The word is quirky. I guess you could call them... The closest thing would probably progressive rock, because they've always been so closely tied with Rush. They toured with them on almost constantly, opened for them on just about every one of their albums. But in some ways more commercial and in some ways more inaccessible. Kim Mitchell's solo career was much more commercially based, more of a hard rock thing for the most part, more melodic, and less of that sort of the eccentric nature of Max Webster's music. Yet Kim Mitchell's music was still, you know, quirky enough to not get that mainstream U.S. acceptance, even though he did really, really well in Canada and still can go out there and play and people come see him. So Max Webster was always kind of on my radar, but just on the radar, never above it, for many, many years. And there are so many Rush connections, but there's one huge one that I'll get into. So started to get into their music, started to purchase their music. Outside of Canada, for many years, their albums were really, really hard to find, at least, you know, before the internet and eBay and Amazon and things like that. So a lot of what I've got are obviously Canadian issues. So I'm going to go over my CD collection of my Max Webster discography for this Tim's Vinyl Confessions. First Max Webster album was self-titled, came out in 1976, and it was the first of many very, very bizarre album covers. That's what it looks like. And something that bugs me when these CDs were reissued, I'm not going to tell you what it is, see if you can figure it out. I'll get into it a few albums down the road. Max Webster, by the way, were another Rush tie, was they were on Anthem Records, the same label that Rush were on. So this is their first album, a reissue of it that probably came out towards the late 80s, maybe early 90s. And there's not much in here. Another Rush connection. This album was co-produced with Terry Brown. And this is the one album that features drums by a guy named Paul Kersey, who left Max Webster. He only played on this album. Apparently he was one of the drummers. Because I always used to wonder who else auditioned for Rush before Neil Peart got the gig after John Rutsey left. Well, this Paul Kersey was one of them. Could have been a way different story. So that's what Anthem discs look like in the late 80s, and that's what this Max Webster one looks like. Back cover, I'm assuming, from the record, and the songs on there. Now, I'll open this up. I don't think... Yes, absolutely wasted space. Like, why? In the States, and when I do my vinyl episode, or if you don't already know, this album also came out, was on Mercury Records, like Rush were, Anthem Mercury. There was those ties, although Max Webster's... they broke that a little bit later on as far as their U.S. label goes. But it came out under the title Hangover, which is the name of the first song on here, with a different album cover. It had this weird, well, I don't know if you'd call it a human bread loaf. I don't know what you'd call it, but it was this big with a green cover. But it's the same album. We'll get to that on the vinyl collection. So, strange album covers, which is probably another reason why people weren't exactly going, oh, I'm going to buy that. They didn't exactly scream off the shelves. And next one I'm going to show you, probably the number one thing where somebody would go, what on earth is that? And it's also the only single CD here I have that's, well, one of them that's not on Anthem. It's also not Canadian. It's the only one that's not Canadian. So here we go. Check that out. Yep. They were not a glam band in any way, shape, or form, but look at that. High Class and Borrowed Shoes. The second Max Webster album. If that wouldn't send people flying away from buying this, I don't know what would. It's a shame because the music's really, really good. This is actually a reissue from Rock Candy, and you've heard me talk about Rock Candy records out of England. Also have a good magazine at the same time. So that's remixed, reloaded. It's remastered and reloaded, and that's their version of High Class and Borrowed Shoes, which originally came out in 1977. So this has a lot more credits in it than the Anthem CD would have. Big, long write-up on the band. Most of the quotes come from Kim Mitchell, obviously, the easiest to get a hold of. He's still active in the music business. Some of the other guys are retired. And some cool pictures. A picture of them there with Thin Lizzy. Must have toured with them in the UK. They had a unique sound to go with a unique look, but wasn't so strange that you couldn't get into the music once you actually started listening to it. Kim Mitchell's guitar playing, I've always thought was underrated. You hear a little bit more on this. And he sang the majority of the songs, except for the songs that the keyboard player Terry Watkinson sang. So, as usual, Rock Candy does a great version with, giving the album its due. There's no bonus material on here. And you can see that there's other CDs available. One you just saw, one you're about to see. So the third Max Webster album came out in 1978. A little bit better on the cover art. Mutiny Up My Sleeve. Written along there. You can see it better on vinyl. Now here, I'm going to tell you what bothers me about these Anthem CDs. Every single one of them says featuring Kim Mitchell. I don't like that. I think that's cheap. It cheapens the fact that, oh, you're going to buy this because you like Kim Mitchell. Buy it because you like the music. I don't understand why they didn't just put stickers on the CDs and I suppose the cassettes that said featuring Kim Mitchell. I understand that as a selling point, but once you've already bought it, you don't need it as part of the album art. So I think that's a little bit lame on their part. Dark printing on this one makes it kind of hard to see, but another good album. Kind of as usual, very little for credits. They've reprinted the back album cover here, but nothing. Now, oddly enough, on this album, I believe this is the one where their bass player left, Mike Tilka, and they were replaced by a guy named Dave Miles. Not to be confused with the current singer, David Miles. But Mike Tilka actually co-produced this album with the band, so he wasn't in the band. It was sort of like Trevor Horn and Yass and all of that thing, which I'm not going to get into, but I'm just not. So anyway, another album. Putting out albums pretty quickly here. Like I said, they had a pretty short lifespan, so. The most successful Max Webster album came out in '79. A Million Vacations, once again, featuring Kim Mitchell. Like that, think of that as not being there. If you got the record or anything like that, that's not there. That's why I like the High Class and Borrowed Shoes. I got the Rock Candy version. It doesn't say that on there. Those are Beach Balls, of course, Vacation, Postcards. And this album was the biggest seller. It's got their two best-known songs, Paradise Skies and also Let Go the Line. This is a really good album. There's the CD. And I've reprinted the back cover on there. Thank you. So, also in 1979, they put out a live album called Live Magnetic Air, which, when Anthem reissued the Max Webster catalog on CD, they didn't put it out. Why do record labels do stupid stuff like that? Anybody that's going to buy the Max Webster CDs is going to buy them all. They're not going to buy just one. Why didn't they put the live album out? A company called Magada, or M-A-G-A-D-A, probably stands for something, reissued some CDs in the mid-90s, Canadian albums, and that was one of them. Now it goes for ridiculous prices, so I don't have a single copy of Live Magnetic Air to show you. The final Max Webster album, so we're a very volatile band, came out in 1980, Universal Juveniles. So by now, I mean, it was basically Kim Mitchell. It really was. So this album is significant if you're a Rush fan, because it contains a little song called Battle Scar, the fifth track on here. It's actually a duet with Max Webster and Rush. I heard this song on a Kim Mitchell on his live album, I Am a Wild Party from 1990. His bass player, Peter Fredette, who has a really high voice, sings what I later learned to be Geddy's parts. I knew about the song, but it just didn't click in that I should seek it out. Chad, you've seen Chad here on the show. He's the one that introduced me to the Max Webster version of the song, Max Webster / Rush, I guess. It is incredible. And at the time, it was before Vapor Trails came out. I didn't know if we were going to hear any new Rush music, so it was like something I hadn't heard before by Rush. But the whole album is really, really good. Not quite as quirky as the previous albums either. Not that that should turn you away from the previous albums, although that yellow jumpsuit's quite quirky. And again, absolutely nothing in it for credits. So, I mentioned that live magnetic air is really rare to get on CD. This is Ma Ga Da, and if I was bigger, somebody would probably take me saying Ma Ga Da and make a gif out of it, because it's funny sounding. But they put out another album, which I did locate, and I'm really, really glad I did. 1981, Max Webster had broken up. Kim Mitchell went on to do a solo career, a fairly successful one in Canada at that. But Anthem Records put out a best of called Diamonds, Diamonds. And here it is on CD. This is a very rare CD to try and look for. And they did one. They put it out. I'm glad for that. But why do they do this? It's upside down. Drives me crazy. I hate that so much. It's so stupid and sloppy. Anyway, so, pick your favorite Max Webster songs, throw them, they're hitting the major ones. But what makes this CD unique is the fact that there's 2 songs on here that had previously been unreleased, Hot Spots and Overnight Sensation. Not world, earth-shattering tunes for their standards, but here they are. And here's what the CD looks like. And it's just a single card for, there's no sense for me to take that out. So then, in the late 80s, Anthem puts out a best of, another best of, more extensive one, because now we're in the CD age, which CDs will hold more. So they put this thing out, the Best of Max Webster featuring Kim Mitchell. Now that was a brand new release, so I won't hold it against them for highlighting it on here, because Kim Mitchell, except for his first EP, was not on Anthem Records. He was actually on Alert Records. Alert Records was another Canadian independent label that was started by Tom Barry, who was once a member of the Anthem team but broke away. So I guess Kim went with him. So Anthem wanted to make sure that they got Kim Mitchell became successful. They wanted to remind people, hey, he used to be in a band. So I understand that. So I got this many, many years ago from Columbia House, and mainly because I wanted the studio version of Battle Scar. And of course I ended up listening to the whole thing. It's a good primer. And always liked it. And it was just years before I decided to further explore the catalog. And what also made this interesting to buy at the time, I'll just show you here. It says at the bottom, or it says on here where each of the songs come from, and on the bottom it is pictured, the albums are pictured. And also available on CD, except for the first 3, which is Diamonds, Diamonds, Live Magnetic Air, and Kim Mitchell's debut EP, which again is the only thing he put out on Anthem. So there's one song on here from his debut EP called Kids in Action. And if you saw me do my Kim Mitchell CD collection and also my top 10 EPs episode, I paid a lot of money to get Kim Mitchell's first album. It was only available on CD for a very limited time in the early 2000s. Now last year, something very cool happened. A company called Music Vaults, Vaults with a Z, announced they were putting out a Max Webster box set on vinyl and CD. Vinyl would have been cool, a little bit pricey, so I opted for the CD option of The Party, which is named after one of their songs. So I don't know if that was one of the band members that drew that caricature or not, but this is a box set, classic album selection, 1976 to 1982. And here's what the back of it looks like. So, what you get is pretty much the complete Max Webster collection in these little book-looking CDs. So there's the first album. It doesn't say featuring Kim Mitchell on any of these, which is awesome. A little better version of a little bigger printing on here. It says it's credited to Olay Media Management, and it's also got an Anthem logo on here. A little bit more on the inside, not much, but a little bit more. And disc itself, Anthem Legacy. I've never seen that. I wonder if they're going to do a Rush one like that, or if I'm really, really lucky, a Coney Hatch one. So that's the first one. High Class and Borrowed Shoes. Again, a little bit better on the artwork. Well, what they had to work with. But just a little bit more information on the album. CD looks the same. Mutiny Up My Sleeve would be the next one. Looks so much better when it doesn't say featuring Kim Mitchell emblazoned across it. A little clearer here. Again, you know, to look at them, they dressed kind of strange. Much more inside here for, you know, credits. Another thing about Max Webster is that they actually gave credit to a band member that wasn't a band member. This guy here, Pi Dubois, you might know that name, is a lyricist. He wrote all the lyrics for Max Webster. He also co-wrote some songs with Rush, not least of which is a little tune called Tom Sawyer, and some others. There's A Million Vacations. A little bit more in here for artwork. And thankfully, they did this right. Live Magnetic Air on CD. Here it is. Their live album. Mutiny Up My Sleeve, Million Vacations, and Live Magnetic Air did not come out in the States on Mercury. They came out on Capitol. And then they went back to Mercury for Universal Juveniles for some reason. So there's the credits there. This was a really, really good thing to get. Universal Juveniles. Some of the artwork from inside of the record, which I have, which was not reproduced on the original CD. And this is a bonus. I already had it, but I don't mind. The first Kim Mitchell EP. Very hard to find. And really, really good. So this is a nice bonus, because it's not Max Webster, although it's got more in common with Max Webster's music than it does with the music that he did after. It's very much a transitional album. Now, maybe you've noticed, no Diamonds. They didn't put that one out. So Hot Spots and Overnight Sensation, I wouldn't have those on CD if I hadn't tracked that down. I don't know why they didn't do that, or why they didn't put those two songs on here. This is called the bootleg. It looks like Kim Mitchell's signature on the bottom of it. These are some live tracks and some previously unreleased sort of jams. So that kind of is the only new portion or unheard portion of this. So a very cool box set. Just wish they'd have put Diamonds in it, but it's a minor complaint because I've got it. So worth checking out. If you're a Rush fan especially, that would probably be the easiest thing. If you're a Rush fan and a Kim Mitchell fan, and you haven't checked out Max Webster, what's stopping you? It's quirky, but if you're a Rush fan, you've got patience to listen for stuff like that, and it'll be repeated listens, and they really do have some great songs. So thanks for watching this edition of Tim's Vinyl Confessions.